I never thought a single night could unravel the life I had worked so hard to build. For years I believed I was living the kind of marriage most people would envy: comfortable home, steady routine, no major arguments. But somewhere along the way the spark that once made my relationship feel alive quietly disappeared. My partner and I became more like roommates than lovers, and though we cared for each other, passion was something we no longer shared. I brushed it aside at first, convincing myself that every long-term relationship eventually cools, but deep down I craved a feeling I couldn't quite name. Work became my escape, a place where I could throw myself into projects and avoid the silence at home. My boss had always been someone I respected, sharp and confident in ways that drew everyone toward him. He wasn't the type to mix business with personal matters, yet there was something in the way he carried himself that I found magnetic. I noticed small things at first. His attentiveness when I spoke, the way he remembered details others easily forgot. It wasn't flirtation exactly, but it felt like more than simple professionalism. The more time I spent around him, the more I realized how much I missed being seen, really seen, in ways that reminded me I was still desirable and interesting. At home, conversations were functional, revolving around chores and bills, while at work, a simple smile or casual comment from him felt like it lit up my day. I tried to dismiss these feelings as silly, something harmless, but they kept growing stronger. I told myself I would never let them cross a line, yet a quiet part of me wondered what might happen if temptation ever tested me. I didn't realize how quickly that question would be answered. It started with late nights at the office, deadlines that kept us working long after everyone else had gone home. What felt like routine responsibility slowly shifted into something far more personal. Conversations that began with projects and schedules drifted into talks about our lives, the weight we carried, and the frustrations we rarely admitted to others. I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't with my partner for years, and he listened with an intensity that made me feel like every word mattered. There was no judgment in his eyes, only understanding, and that small space of vulnerability drew me in more than I wanted to admit. The closeness grew naturally, like a secret neither of us dared to acknowledge out loud. A glance held longer than necessary, a touch on the arm that lingered just enough to spark a fire under the surface. I told myself it was innocent, that I was imagining it, but my heart raced every time our shoulders brushed or our laughter filled the empty office. He started to share parts of himself too, his own struggles, his loneliness despite appearing so put together. That exchange of truths became a quiet bond, something that lived outside the world I went home to every night. One evening, after hours of talking, he suggested grabbing a drink. It felt harmless, just two colleagues unwinding, but the moment I agreed, a part of me knew it wasn't so simple. At the bar, the atmosphere was lighter, freer than the office. Jokes came easily, laughter flowed, and the space between us grew dangerously thin. The more I compared the comfort I felt with him to the emptiness waiting at home, the harder it became to deny what was happening. That night, boundaries blurred in ways I could no longer ignore. When we left the bar, the air between us was heavy with everything unspoken. He offered to drive me home, and though I hesitated, I accepted. The ride was quiet, filled with glances that carried more weight than words could. When we arrived, he didn't immediately pull away, and instead of walking inside alone, I heard myself inviting him in for just one more drink. It was the smallest choice, yet it shifted everything. What began as conversation quickly dissolved into silence broken by the unmistakable pull of desire. One look became a kiss, and that kiss unraveled all the restraint I thought I had. It wasn't reckless lust alone, it was the feeling of being wanted, of being seen in a way I had forgotten existed. Every touch felt both forbidden and intoxicating, every moment laced with fear and exhilaration. I knew I was crossing a line I could never uncross, but in that instant, I didn't care. The weight of years without passion, of nights spent lying next to someone who barely noticed me, all collided with the intensity of finally being noticed, craved, chosen. It was overwhelming, a storm of emotions that drowned out logic. As it happened, guilt lingered at the edges of my mind, whispering warnings I refused to hear. Yet even as part of me screamed to stop, another part clung to the rush, to the rare sense of being alive again. Hours slipped away without notice, and by the time reality crept back in, I realized I had crossed into territory where nothing would ever be the same. Walking away from that night wasn't just leaving him behind, it was leaving behind the person I thought I was. I had betrayed more than my partner. I had betrayed myself. The morning after hit harder than I ever imagined. Lying beside my partner, pretending everything was normal, I felt the weight of a secret that threatened to crush me. Every word I spoke at home felt forced, every smile rehearsed. He didn't notice the shift, which made the guilt even sharper. I wanted to confess, but fear of destroying everything we had built kept me silent. Instead, I carried the burden alone, replaying the night over and over until it consumed me. The thrill I had once felt quickly turned into a knot of shame that never loosened. At work, the dynamic was no longer the same. A simple good morning felt heavy, a glance across the room carried memories we couldn't erase. Conversations became shorter, careful, filled with pauses to avoid what neither of us dared to mention. The secrecy created an invisible wall, both drawing us together and pushing us apart. I caught myself wondering if it had meant the same to him, or if it was nothing more than a lapse in judgment. That uncertainty gnawed at me almost as much as the betrayal itself. Nights grew restless. I lay awake listening to the steady breathing beside me, wondering how long I could keep up the lie. The life I once thought was stable now felt fragile, built on a foundation I had cracked with one decision. I didn't know if what I had done destroyed everything or if it exposed what had already been broken long before. What haunted me most wasn't just the fear of being caught, but the realization that a single night had changed me in ways I couldn't undo. Whether it was a mistake or a revelation, one truth remained: I could never go back to who I was before.